Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
All right, welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yep.
Ben, the Dallas Mavericks defeated the Oklahoma City Thunder tonight without Luka, without Klay, without Dereck Lively, without Naji Marshall, without Jaden Hardy. Now, granted, Oklahoma City also did not have Isaiah Hartenstein or Chet Holmgren.
But they tried to make up for it by killing Daniel Gafford.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
They did. They gave him a good heel strike right to the forehead and a solid slap to the nuts. But he could not.
Succession too. So you're back. Congratulations.
Yeah. He looked like he got put in concussion protocol, sent back to the locker room. Actually, it was a neck injury. I was actually pretty worried for a minute there, and I'm not really one to get worried about injuries, but. At this point, if you're a Mavs fan and you see another person go down, especially one grabbing his head and neck and not getting up off the floor, it's cause for concern. But you're right. That dude came out of the locker room, and it was almost like Lou Dort looked at him and said, "I thought we got rid of you," and then just punched him right in the nuts. And so, but Dallas won. I don't look. I'm not one to gloat.
This is a lie, listeners.
It's a lie from the devil. It's a lie from the devil. Because Dallas has won 7 of the last 10 against OKC. All right. OKC has lost 7 games this season. 3 of them are to Dallas. So whereas the rest,
how many of those games was Luka Doncic part of?
And this
0. The one time he played, they beat Dallas.
Yeah. And so they got and real quick, just to be clear, this is not us saying that Dallas is better without Luka Doncic. In fact, I'm about to make the exact opposite case in just a second. But and I just want to give credit. Like I pulled this off of Twitter from Nick Angstadt, I don't know how to say his name, Nick Angstadt, at Nick Van Exit. He points out
fantastic username. It's a fantastic username.
Yes, it is a great username. He points out that the Mavericks are 3-1 against the Oklahoma City Thunder, whereas the rest of the NBA has only managed to win 4 games. The Mavs MFFL page puts out 7 of the last 12 losses for OKC have been to the Dallas Mavericks. All right. I bring all this up to say, before the season started, after the season started, after the play-in game, the in-season tournament game, after all of the injuries, I have consistently said that Dallas is a better team than the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're not a better regular season team, per se. But one of the interesting things about the Dallas OKC matchup is that you can get some playoff level basketball to a certain extent, even in the regular season against these two teams, because they're so familiar with each other. So it's easier for them to game plan for one another. And I bring all that up to say, you have all these guys like, what's old boy's name? Tom Havastro?
Yeah.
Matt Moore. You have all these people who, they just like read OKC data porn all day long, and they get so excited about what they think that the Thunder are. And the truth of the matter is they've never won a significant playoff series. I understand that the team's maturing. I understand that the team's developing. I even understand they've acquired some new pieces. At a certain point, you have to look at these two teams and see Oklahoma City does not match up against Dallas very well.
They don't. They're too small. There's a couple of issues here. One, they're much smaller than Dallas. Dallas has OKC is small, but they're physical. That is
Dallas's point guard is bigger than almost everyone on the OKC Thunder team.
I mean, it probably weighs more than everyone on the OKC Thunder team, but maybe
Hartenstein.
Hartenstein.
Yeah,
but the Dallas is one of the teams that can, through the lineup 1 through 5, match up physically, like have a strength advantage at every single one of those matchups. PJ Washington causes significant issues and gets under the skin of OKC. You've seen this multiple times this season already, where like he frustrates OKC, gets them out of sorts. He makes you've seen them lash out, literally, literally punch people in the balls in frustration, and he causes some different problems. Naji Marshall, the same thing. He didn't play tonight, but he's the same type of player. Daniel Gafford with his strength, now OKC's missing some of its centers, but he was fantastic in the minutes when he wasn't either deathly injured,
concussed or neutered,
or being punched in the nutsack. But Dallas also has the ability to bring they're deep defensively 1 through 15 on the roster.
Yes.
Kessler Edwards started today. He's the 13th man in the rotation. He's a fantastic defender. He truly is now offensively.
But and for any OKC fans who are like, we didn't have Chet, we didn't have Isaiah Hartenstein, noted. But you should also note what Ben just said. Kessler Edwards, who is the 13th man in the rotation, started today.
This is look, man. I'm not going to give you credit for you lost to a Mavs team that didn't have Luka, Lively, Klay Thompson, Naji Marshall, Jaden Hardy. That's half the freaking rotation, and and some players aren't even in the rotation. Okay, so.
Brandon Williams played significant minutes tonight. He's on a two-way. The Mavs are panhandling out there.
Yeah. And Prosper played like 30 minutes tonight.
Yeah, and I'll give him props, man. I'm very excited. Markieff Morris played. 100%. That tells you everything you need to know. I think Markieff Morris serves an important locker room role on that team. I don't think they envisioned him playing in any games that were not out of hand.
I don't think Markieff Morris envisioned playing any games. You saw with his play today.
Yeah. And but I'm very excited about what Omax Prosper could mean for this team this year, but especially down the road. Very, very, very high on Omax. Also very excited about Jaden Hardy when he gets healthy. But this team fully healthy, when you look at the way they match up with the OKC Thunder, I think Hartenstein and Lively are probably like a push. I think Hartenstein does some things offensively that are very useful. I think some of that ends up being exaggerated, like how much of an impact he's having offensively. I think a lot of the buckets he gets are, sort of dump offs, like a lot of the type of stuff that Josh Giddey was getting to. I'm not saying that that's not a value. Because a lot of
really good connective tissue player.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of saying it. He doesn't have the defensive presence that like a Dereck Lively and he's not the rim protector that Daniel Gafford is either. But when you consider the fact that the Mavs are actually running this sort of twin-headed monster at the center position in a rotation. I think that's one example or one way in which OKC will struggle to match up with them for 48 minutes. The way that OKC plays, and I think this is going to be even worse with Hartenstein and Chet on the floor at the same time, is going to force Chet to be more of a perimeter player. It's going to be too clogged for him to be playing around the rim. That, in my opinion, that makes it too easy for PJ Washington to guard him. And then when you look at and quite honestly, I think you could put Luka on Chet Holmgren. But when you look at the wave of perimeter defenders that the Mavs have now amassed, that they can throw at players like Jalen Williams and Shai, I think that me and you have talked about this just ad nauseum. Jason Kidd's a tinkerer. If you don't think that part of tonight's game plan was to screw around with different defensive strategies to figure out what works best and then note that for the playoffs, you're insane. And if you don't think, as an OKC fan, that Shai is going to get the Anthony Edwards treatment in the playoffs, because everybody saw it tonight. Everybody saw it tonight.
That's the sort of one of the final notes we could put on this game. I think even more telling than this result, which was sort of like we're in the dog days of the season. This is both teams are missing key players. Dallas, OKC absolutely should have beaten Dallas with the amount of injuries Dallas played. This is, and they're already complaining online, but world's tiniest violin stuff. Like,
OKC Thunder fans are complaining online?
Yeah.
What are they complaining about?
We were missing all our key players, blah blah blah. But
your MVP candidate was on the floor. Your second option scorer was on the floor.
But yeah, and to that point, the most telling thing of this game was the difficulties, the Dallas Mavericks strategy of swarming Shai when he had the ball and basically saying anyone else beat us. And OKC, it created matchup advantages, but they have two people on their team who you can reliably trust to bring the ball up the court. That is it. 1 through 15, they have two players.
That is the biggest shortcoming of the people talk so much about their size, and I do think it can be an issue. Not saying it can't. The lack of ball handling and play and play creating is an issue for the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's a red flag level issue.
Because neither Jalen Williams, who is the second ball handler, or Shai is also an elite level passer. They do not have a lot of playmaking on this team. They have fantastic, Shai is fantastic creating his own shot. Jalen Williams is good at creating his own shot. But you can see the effect that strategy had. It equalized the playing field and took away the biggest advantage that OKC had in this game, which was, they had their A-level star in Shai, and Dallas was missing theirs. But you're going to see a lot in the second half of the season of teams that are now getting their third or fourth go around against OKC. And we've talked about this before, but OKC enters every game at this high of intensity level, where most teams enter right here. And they, and if you don't match it, if you're not able to raise your level, they will run you off the court.
Yes,
they will punk you. And you saw earlier with the first, I think the second game, but the first, the game where in the in-season tournament, Dallas wasn't able to match that level. In the two games since then, they've come out really aggressive. They come out really hard. I think you're gonna, once you.
Well, and I think, to be clear, some of that was Luka too, just being like, I ain't doing this shit.
Yeah.
And there's no other way of looking at it.
Oh yeah, and you're going to start seeing teams once you've experienced this sort of like the blitzkrieg that they run on you at the beginning games. Second time around, third time around, fourth time around, you're ready for it now. And I think you're going to see them struggle more. And they also there's becoming a playbook against them. You've seen really good teams. You saw Cleveland do this a little bit. You saw Dallas do this. It's one that makes logical sense. You're going to see teams forcing the ball out of Shai's hands.
Yes,
because they're and because Jalen Williams is a good player. I am not worried about him. I will let him score 40 points because I do not trust that he can score that efficiently and create for others. And
let's just tie those two ends together, because this is really what the strategy is. Force the ball out of Shai's hands, because I don't trust anyone else to put the ball on the ground and do anything with it. That's the issue.
Everyone else on their team is specialists.
Everybody else on that team is on the floor
specialists. They're 3-point shootings. They're catching shooters.
They're catching.
They're all specialists.
Yes,
they're all specialists, and they're Jalen Williams. He can create his own shot. I am not worried about him at a playoff level. Of him, he cannot at this point run an offense at an elite level in a playoff setting. He's not
going to be efficient enough.
No, he's not going to be. He's not going to be efficient enough to beat the elite, top teams like Dallas.
But let's say this too, because one of the things I think you see tonight with There were times where Omax was on Shai. There were times where Kessler Edwards did a really good job on Shai. Kleba ended up on Shai some. One of the things I think that Jason Kidd saw in that too is, obviously that first wave guy is going to be PJ Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that people are kind of overlooking this because they think of Luka as a point guard, which he clearly is on offense. But in reality, defensively, he's more like a 3 or a 4. And I think that in a playoff series, I'd be comfortable with putting Luka on Chet Holmgren, letting PJ Washington be on Shai. And then when they try to get Shai in the game without PJ, or they start looking for a switch, if you've got Omax out there or you've got Kessler Edwards out there, like one of these long athletic guys, it forces Shai to adjust a shot. And one of the things you have to understand about a player who shoots with the efficiency that Shai does from his spots, you could blindfold Shai.
Oh yeah,
and ask him to shoot.
Looking at the hoop. He's not looking at the hoop. He just
the
knows
ball's
the
coming out. The ball's coming out at the same trajectory every time. Kessler Edwards, these 6'7" guys that are able to stay with him step for step and get their hand up, it's forcing him to alter the trajectory of the shot. And that's one of the reasons you're seeing a dip in efficiency from those spots tonight. He played really well to start the game. He played really well to close the game.
Look, he's the top 3 player in the league. He's gonna get his points. It's the Bruce Bowen versus Kobe Bryant situation. You're not stopping them.
No,
you're not muzzling them. All you can hope for is to make them less efficient than they usually are.
I need to make you slightly less efficient and prevent someone else from defeating me.
Yeah, and I think that one of the other things that we've mentioned but we haven't focused on. Dallas has a decent amount, one of the most in the league, of tall 3 and 4s, small forwards and power forwards who move laterally really well. They're not necessarily the world's greatest athletes in terms of speed or in terms of vertical ability or even in terms of height, but they shuffle their feet really well. Maxi Kleba does that well. PJ Washington does that well. Naji Marshall does that well. Kessler Edwards does that well. You have a bunch of them that you can throw and provide different looks.
Omax does it.
Omax does it well. He's got a lot of. He's very raw. I wouldn't trust him in a playoff setting because he's kind of he can make.
If the playoffs started,
his decision making's a little.
If the playoffs started today, Omax isn't going to be getting any significant minutes.
Yeah, he still needs to improve his decision making. But
actually, if the playoffs started today, Omax may start.
Yeah, no. Playoff match started today. You're saying start. Brandon Williams might start. That is something that causes Shai problems just because of the height and he relies on his shiftiness. He is fast. He's not like De'Aaron Fox fast. He's not his thing. He is pure skill. He's gotten to where he is based off of this elite level skill and his ability. He's so slippery and shifty that causes teams problems. But Dallas is just a bad matchup for OKC. Every team has a bad matchup. It's just there's no way around it. And
I think there is some. I think the ball handling thing is a roster construction problem.
Yeah.
I don't see any way around it. Obviously they could prove me wrong, but all these people who are out there just heralding OKC as the second coming,
it's still an issue. Even if they win a title, it's still an issue.
To me, we're talking about red flag level stuff. We're talking about a team is going to effectively scheme to force the ball out of Shai's hands.
It's not really complicated to do that. You saw OKC do it to Luka in that one game.
Everybody can do it to anybody. It's not a hard thing.
Edwards thing, Shai's not going to pout and do an interview saying, I wish I could just shoot the ball. But
the difference with doing it with Luka is, I think, twofold. One, last year, you're talking about an elite level passer. So when you force it out of his hands, it could be to the easiest check down. or it could be a 40-mile-an-hour dart to the corner to an open shooter.
You're also talking about, the second option is Jalen Williams in terms of ball handling.
That's the next.
And then the second thing is Kyrie Irving,
yes.
in terms of ball handling.
And then also go on down to the third and fourth options with ball handling. Yeah. Like you're talking about like it, and really go on down to the sixth and seventh options. You're talking about Quentin Grimes and Naji Marshall. These guys can put the ball on, if it's Spencer Dinwiddie, they can put the ball on the floor and attack the basket, create their own shot, knock down open shots. It's just there is a versatility that corresponds with both size and skill that Dallas has that OKC does not.
Yep.
And then the final comparison I'll make to them, and you mentioned this when we did the pod after the Boston OKC game.
Yeah.
Mark Daigneault is an exceptional coach when it comes to preparing for a game.
Oh, yeah.
I actually think Jason Kidd is exceptionally bad at preparing.
I would agree. He gets blitzed in every game one. I mean, that's just, it's sort of
it's almost to the point to where I think like he's just kind of like I always tell my son, first play of the game, just bring the ball down the court, do whatever the hell you want. Let's just see what they're doing. Like, and I almost feel like Jason Kidd goes into game ones. He's like, look, guys, just go have some fun. Soak it all up. Let's just see what they're doing. And, I doubt that that's the case. But like, it's interesting to me that he gets blitzed in every game one. And then Anthony Edwards talks shit to Kyrie Irving. And it's like, they're like, we can't let that go. And then they come out and they blitz Minnesota in game one. So that it's not proof, but it suggests that there's a little more control that they have over how they perform in game one than they let on. But when you're comparing game planning between Mark Daigneault and Jason Kidd, I give the advantage to Mark Daigneault. And I think that benefits him in regular season matchups against a lot of teams. I think that the problem is when you get into the playoffs, I think it's less about game planning and more about adjustments.
Yeah. No, there's a thing also with teams that play at a really, really high level. It's the Chris Paul phenomenon from when he was a player. If you are a team that is playing at an extremely high level during the regular season, like you're playing at 100% of the regular season, it's really, really good. It allows you to win a bunch of games. But on the flip side, what it also means is you don't have really a next gear, because you've already hit your next gear. They're making you operate at your highest gear already. Teams that are sort of bumbling along or like are struggled, they can, at least with them, there's the potential of hitting a next gear. I don't really see a next gear with OKC, and they've.
Oh, I agree 100%.
Yeah. And so what it means is teams are going to know the level they have to beat, they have to reach to beat you. And they also know that if they can reach that, they can match that, then it's going to be really hard for you to beat them again.
And if you're in the same conference as them, they've seen your highest level 4 times that year. They know what to expect.
Yeah. And, I think it will be very interesting. I think you're going to see a lot in the second half of the season of teams replicating the Mavs' defensive strategy tonight. And I think it's going to be interesting to see whether you'll see more games like this where you would pencil them into an obvious win on the schedule. And I can guarantee you the Mavs, they thought they had a chance tonight, but they are elated, but they did not go into this game thinking, oh, yeah, for sure we can win this one. They're depleted. They came in this game depleted, and OKC's much closer to full strength than they are.
I do think they've embraced the idea that OKC is their rival and they get up for it. But to your point, and I think this is another sort of data point that I'm checking off in my thinking about how good this Dallas Mavericks team really is at full strength. Yes, they won tonight. They took the Timberwolves the other night to the final buzzer too. And like you're talking about a severely depleted team that's able to go toe to toe with really good teams.
There's a lot of hysterics about Dallas that doesn't take into account the fact that this team with Kyrie, keywords with Kyrie, is pretty good. You know, they're a playing caliber team with Kyrie at the very least.
Yeah, 100%. And they can show up on any given night. And
they go into these games like with goofy ass levels of injuries. Whereas like, all right, it's Kyrie and 3 dudes that we found off the street because everyone else has the bubonic plague. And like that changes things. But like Kyrie, PJ Washington, Grimes, Dinwiddie when he's not acting like an idiot. Gafford, like that's a serviceable NBA team right there. So like there's a lot of conversation online talk about the Mavs like they're the Wizards. Let me tell you, as someone who lives in the DMV area, you are not the Wizards. You are not close to the Wizards. The Wizards are another level of bad. This is a serviceable basketball team that's going to be able to tread water until they have their full roster, and then it's going to hit their top gear. Like
100%.
People need to relax. And I know their expectations were really high, but this is just what happens when you have injuries.
You're not.
You have the potential to recover from them. You have the talent on the roster, even right now, to be able to get to the playoffs. Everyone just needs to chill.
100%. You literally are a fan of a franchise that has built itself around arguably the greatest offensive basketball player in the world. Who, in my opinion, has an ability to upgrade the value of his teammates in a way that few players, I mean, honestly, like present day, probably only Jokic can do. But certainly it's something LeBron's been able to do over the course of his career.
We'll talk about Wemby in a second. Yeah, when he's at his peak, he can do that as well.
But like you've got a guy who can create open looks for you in a really unique way that's missing.
Yep.
And when that comes back, it's not just going to be that he is unlocking all of these guys' talents. It's going to be that he's unlocking the talents of guys or it's not even unlocking them. They've been forced to unlock them themselves. They've been forced to learn how to do this themselves. Instead of Luka having to do all this for them now, you're going to have guys that have learned to do it for themselves, and they're going to be playing off of Luka. They're going to be much more competent and capable because because of games like tonight, they've been in that spot themselves where they've had to be the guy who went and got a bucket. And I think that they're going to be a much better team for it. So, look, we'll end on this. If you are a Dallas Mavericks fan and you have been saying things like the season is over, you've lost your goddamn mind. This season is far from over. Luka Doncic will most likely be back in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Sometime in that time frame. He'll be back in the month of February. Let's just say that. When Luka comes back, he's paired with Kyrie. You've got Gafford out there. You've got PJ Washington, Naji Marshall, Quentin Grimes. You'll have Jaden Hardy back by then. You've got Omax working into that. Like, we'll see what happens with Kessler Edwards and how they're going to use him. Klay will be out there. Klay's an entirely different player who truly does need Luka to unlock his talents at this point in his career. And Luka will be more than capable of doing that. You'll be looking at Klay stepping into open threes rather than having to run off pin downs and hit, moving threes. The Dallas Mavericks are going to be fine. They're not going to be in the play-in unless they continue to suffer a terrible rash of injuries. Yeah. They're going to be a playoff team. They're going to probably be somewhere around the 5-6 seed, maybe even the 4 seed, depending on what some teams do and how fast they get back and what clip they can win at. But I have a great deal of confidence in this team. And also, we've said this before, Jason Kidd has a history of landing the plane. don't hit the panic button on him. His sense of urgency and your sense of urgency are not the same thing. And while I think that
I can assure you, he does not care about the regular season. So yeah.
And I'm saying to you, like, is you are, a tried and true Mavs fan who tunes into every game. Probably to some extent, your mental well-being hinges on the ebbs and flows of their season, and I can respect that. But you also need to be able to take a deep breath and step back and be like, I'm not saying he's the greatest coach ever, but he is Jason fucking Kidd. He's one of the best point guards ever. He's had some success as the coach of the Dallas Mavericks with Luka Doncic. He's made 2 Western Conference Finals and a Finals in the last 3 years. He has an idea of what he's doing. And I don't think that, the struggles that they've had up until this point have been like his strategy from the outset. I think he's dealt with an incredibly bad luck. But with that said, like, he's matched that luck and managed to string together, some wins here and there without Luka or Kyrie, and keep this team kind of in the thick of it until he gets a superstar back. And so take a deep breath, drink some fucking chamomile tea, calm down. It's going to be fine. Yeah. The Mavs are going to represent the Western Conference in the NBA Finals this year.
You heard it here first, yeah.
Well, you heard it here first a long time ago. I'm just reiterating that the Mavs will represent the Western Conference in the NBA Finals. So with that, hey, wherever you get your podcasts, like, subscribe. Please follow us, share our content with your friends. We really appreciate it. And we'll check in with you next time.
Peace.